Welcome back to another episode of BestowCast. If you tuned into last week's episode, I went through a huge laundry list of all these things that I've got to talk about and add more things on. You know, there's a Hasbro thing coming on, and I know my channel wants to focus. I want to focus stuff on collecting as well, and I spend a lot of time talking about movies. Because I'm into movies. I had hopes and dreams of becoming a movie producer, but enough of that crap. I derail. I don't even get into the first the thing. I just derail it right off the bat. Just derail it right off the right in the beginning. So Disney Plus came out with this series called Willow, which was a series of 8 episodes, I believe. You think I'd really have this all? Oh, here we go. 8 episodes. 8 episodes of Willow. They do the thing. They do the thing that I like them to do, where they keep it brief. It's like, let's not do it in 12 episodes. Let's do it in 8 episodes. Willow. What can I really say about Willow? This was a series I wanted a sequel to. I think I don't know, were we really promised sequels to Willow? I wanted a sequel to Willow. Everybody was up George Lucas's ass to make a Star Wars sequel and make Indiana Jones sequels and whatnot. And this is kind of the unsung hero of him. Is that nah, I don't know. Is that proper? Where they didn't really sequel it. I mean, I know it was popular, but I don't think like in terms of how Hollywood does things, I don't think it ever made money in the box office. So it never really, I don't think it ever warranted a sequel. And I don't know how, it took forever for them to put it on VHS and later on the DVD and such, that I don't know if it ever warranted, enough to get sequels. There was I think it was at least a trilogy of book sequels that were written by George Lucas and Chris Claremont of X-Men fame, that they had written. And I had read I've partially read the first book of the first series, and it's like, I guess this would serve as the sequel. So I'm gonna go for another derailment here. So one of the first movies that I kind of recall seeing in the theaters, or more vividly. Now, I think I've seen other movies, or I know I've been taken to other movies in the theater when I was much younger of a child. Like I vaguely remember a reissue of Sleeping Beauty, but I'm not sure if this happens before or after not Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom. I'm not sure if this takes place before or after Temple of Doom. Temple of Doom, I specifically remember seeing in the theaters. I specifically have a lot of memories from that. I specifically remember the minecart scene and bouncing off the walls. Oh, and I specifically remember like being told to stop bouncing on the chairs, even though I was like into the movie. I was ducking and dodging with that movie, and that's kind of a reason why I guess like that ranks as one of my favorite movies. It says a lot about me, because I guess a lot of people dislike Temple of Doom, and that's the worst movie of Indiana Jones, but that's probably like my favorite movie of my favorite movie of the series. Temple of Doom, which was 1984. So I would have been like probably would have been around like 9 years old when Temple of Doom came out. So that shows you how far my memory is. But then I always kind of claim was like that when you're 10, that's when like most of the stuff that you like, or that you're nostalgic for, kind of really seeps in. It's like G.I. Joe and Transformers for me and stuff was all roughly around that time, and Indiana Jones. But the other thing that I recall about that was that I was like in either second or third grade at that time, and I recall the media coming out around that movie, especially like when we went to like have lunch, and our lunch was always in our lunchroom, and our library in the elementary school that I went to was the same room. So I always recall going to lunch and seeing the making of Temple of Doom. And that was marketed towards children. That movie was one of the first movies. That and Gremlins was one of the first movies that pushed for the PG-13 rating, because that was kind of a little bit too adult for kids. But there were books. I vaguely recall a read-along story, and I recall a making-of story that was was geared towards children, maybe geared towards a little bit older children than what I was. But I remember that Indiana Jones book being in our library, and just basically showed the making of, like it showed that minecart scene and how it was made and everything. The reason why I bring that up is we fast forward a couple more years now. 1988 is when the next film came out, and so I was in middle school by that time, and again those books started showing up. I remember Entertainment Tonight talking about Willow. That's probably like the first time I became aware that actors and the roles that they play were two separate things, and that there was a show called Entertainment Tonight, or now called ET, where they would interview people. And I remember Harrison Ford's interview, I remember Ron Howard's interview, and I remember Val Kilmer's interview, and I specifically remember them talking about the brownie scenes, and how they made the brownies, and the special effects, and how they made the again, I didn't watch the original Willow in such a long time, and I haven't watched it in preparation to this, so it's a little bit rusty. But I recall he used something. He used the wand. He touched the troll, and the troll became a 3-headed dragon. That whole thing was a making of. I remember that being in one of those books. I remember that being on a big deal on ET, and I remember the whole thing with the brownies. So they're kind of this whole, I guess, marketing kind of thing that goes along with both Willow and Indiana Jones. Now, I guess, like I said, I don't think that Willow was a financial. Well, before I even go into that, Willow I missed in theaters. We never saw that in an actual theater, movie theater. We saw that in the drive-in, and that might have been one of the first times, or close to the first time, that I seen a movie in the drive-in theater. That's still down the road from me. And side track is kind of still kind of a reason why I don't really like watching movies in the drive-in. Sorry, I know there's a lot of friends around me that really love the drive-in experience and everything, and I think the drive-in experience is a little different when I'm older. I think the drive-in experience is different when it's a movie you've already seen. But I think that going to see a movie in the drive-in, if you've never seen that movie before, generally speaking, you're going to see that movie because you're on a budget and you want to see something on the cheap. It has a tendency to be a little bit of a negative. It's a negative for me because you can't ever see it. It's always dim and dark. I can only imagine going to see something like Wakanda Forever or Ant-Man 3 in a drive-in, because Marvel likes everything dark. You probably would never see a damn thing at all. So I just remember Willow just being dark and you can't see it. I remember RoboCop 2 being dark and you can't see it. I remember you have to listen to it on the radio station, so you couldn't hear what was going on because of interference or whatever. I just remember it being a negative experience because you can't get into the movie because there's all these other things that kind of bleed into it. Going as a high schooler, on the other hand, has some different implications. It's even still. I don't even recall the last time I even went. I think we took the kids to see Spider-Man, the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, one of them, and the theaters and stuff. And I just remember you had to buy an external radio because you don't want your car to buy a battery to run out. But anyway, I'm rambling and I'm gone way off topic. But I just recall that being a thing, and that's kind of a thing that I kind of miss. I mean, I guess they kind of did that with the prequels, but they didn't really release books on how to. There was always like, I just remember a lot of magazines that were more focused towards that, the making of. So that was kind of stuff. I mean, that might be the formative of how producer Paul, or I guess I should say that Pantsless producer Paul, how that Pantsless producer became Pantsless. I mean, became a production, got into production was through these kind of books that were available when he was younger. We never got sequels. I wanted a sequel to this. I think when it finally came out VHS, I bought the VHS tape for it. I so wanted more sequels. I mean, we had at least 3 sequels by the time it came to VHS of Indiana Jones. We've had like all the Star Wars stuff. I wanted more Willow, and we never got more Willow. So it was kind of a thing that I was kind of excited for when Disney said that they got Lucasfilm, and that was one of the things they were looking for. And like I said earlier, the closest that we got was the novels that were written by Chris Claremont and George Lucas. But now we got this kind of this Disney Plus series that they finally dropped on us. And, you know, as an overall review, again, warning, you know, if you've never listened to the show, when I'm talking about this media like this, it's going to be spoiler heavy. I'm going to probably talk about spoilerish kind of points to this. So you've been warned. But yeah, I was excited for the Disney Plus series. They did like a casting announcement, and I think it happened during like the pandemic. I seem to recall like watching a lot of those kind of things. You know, whatever they could leak. You know, and it wasn't really much. It was just kind of interview with the stars, and you know, it's just kind of more the Disneyfication of Willow. You know, you know, this is all the child actors or children actors that are a part of this. Of course, it was great to see Warwick Davis return to the role of Willow. We had some of the other characters kind of come back. I ended up having to like look up. You know, I had to look up to see if Sorcerer was still the same actress, and it is. It's the same. I just couldn't recognize her anymore. So a lot of the actors kind of returned to their roles. One of the brownies comes back. Supposedly both brownies are alive, but they, you know, in reference in the series, the other brownie is off adventuring. They play it off as if he's dead, but he's off adventuring. You know, of course, we got and I'm going to butcher the name. I apologize. Tony Revel. Oh, Jesus Christ. We have Tony, who was in the Spider-Man movies, who was Flash Thompson. So it was kind of nice to, you know, we got a Disney alumni, I guess you could call him. We've got, well, is he Disney alumni? Because technically that's a Sony movie, isn't it? But yeah, we got a guy from a Spider-Man movie, and then we've got like, all right, Erin Kellyman. Shout outs to her who has performed. She has the hat trick. She has the hat trick of this movie where she's now officially, she's been in Star Wars. She has been in the Marvel Universe, and she has now been in the Willow series. She has the hat trick. It's how many more Disney properties is she going to be in? Actually, she's a great actress. Glad to see her in a lot of these, you know, in these series, you know, over and over again. It's just interesting that that she's been in these 3 things almost like right back to back. I guess what now she just needs to be in Indiana Jones, like put her, like cast her in an Indiana Jones movie, but she has to be like a featured like character in Indiana Jones. Overall, like the overall premise, I had earlier mentioned about the novel series, and there's some things that I kind of recall from the novel. I didn't get super deep into it, and I never bought the other 2 books that went to the series. If you know anything about well, I'm going to assume that this is your first podcast, and you've never listened to a podcast before, or at least never listened to a BestowCast before. I'm really bad about reading books, sitting down and reading books. The only books that I've ever sat down and read cover to cover and read a whole lot of is the Terry Pratchett Discworld series. But I'm really, really bad with books, especially if I get bored or disinterested halfway through, and then I just put it down, or I take a break and then I never get back to it. I think we're on like 6 or 7 years now that I've been trying to read the rebooted Thrawn series, and I'm only like halfway, and I just like every day I should just like take some time off and read that book. So it kind of falls the same way with the the Willow book series, and I seem to recall that there were just some elements that seemed to carry over. Like I think there's still more in the book series that had to do with Mad Mardigan, but Mad Mardigan unfortunately is not a part of this series. Elora Danan, or not really Elora Danan, but Princess Kit is trying to find her father. He kind of went off on a quest and never came home. And there's other characters, the other characters that were introduced that were proteges, I guess, friends of, part of his team when he went out questing, and that they seem to have known or have an idea where he may have been lost to. Well, if you don't know, or if you're out of the loop, or if you don't follow that deeply into these things, Val Kilmer had throat cancer several years ago, and it took away his voice. So he not only has, like, he's unable to speak with his own natural voice, but he's also, like, because of the cancer, he has put on a lot of weight. And I guess well, I didn't really realize it, or I didn't really think about it, but when I watched what was it? Kevin Smith's not last movie, because Clerks 3 would be his last movie. The movie right before that one, Jay and Silent Bob. Oh, why is this escaping my brain? Brain, work, darn you. Anyway, the one that came out before Clerks 3 had Val Kilmer in it, and I didn't even think about it, because Val Kilmer plays Silent Bob. I'm going to spoil that movie. I already just spoiled that movie. Val Kilmer plays rebooted. Jay and Silent Bob rebooted. Gosh darn it. Val Kilmer plays Silent Bob in that movie, and it makes sense. He's unable to speak. I didn't think of it then, and when I rewatched that not too terribly long ago, I was like, oh, that makes sense. And he takes on the affect of what Silent Bob does throughout that movie, where he doesn't speak, but then he'll type something up and he'll text it. So that's what Val Kilmer did in that movie. But in more mainstream, it's kind of weird, because nobody, like, mainstream doesn't even point that out. Nobody ever mentions that in mainstream. I've never seen that mentioned in mainstream. What I do see mentioned in mainstream is his return in Top Gun, the Top Gun sequel, Top Gun Maverick. And I guess they do some digital trickery. I guess they digitally recreated the voice via old takes of the original movie, and that's how they did it in that. I guess Val Kilmer, I don't know if Val Kilmer, sorry, I'm all over the place, but I don't know if Val Kilmer appeared in Maverick. I'm not a huge Top Gun fan, and I didn't really watch it. I don't really care to watch it. So I don't know if he physically appears in that movie at all. But in Willow, he was, from what I was reading, he was supposed to physically appear in the movie, or in the series rather. But he didn't, because of, this was filmed during COVID. So they didn't want to put him at medical risk, bring him on set. So he never appears on set. However, his voice does appear throughout the series. And I'm assuming, that it was done the same way as, Darth Vader was portrayed, how James Earl Jones was portrayed in the Obi-Wan series, where they just digitally used his voice. They just made his voice in a computer somewhere, and it just spouted out the lines. So Mad Mardigan has lines throughout the series. He speaks to them throughout the movie at different points. But it's not, obviously it's not Val Kilmer. It's his likeness being used, his digital likeness. I assume with his approval. I mean, James Earl Jones had to approve, Disney using his voice as Vader in perpetuity. Going forward, even after his death, that they could always have a Darth Vader voice. I'm assuming that this is probably the same thing that kind of went down with him, with Val Kilmer. Why do we have to do this thing? I guess this is just a Marvel affect, where we just kind of got to be like, I don't mind being light and humorous when it comes to these things, but sometimes we got to delve into the realm where it's just complete freaking wackiness, complete freaking weirdoism. There's one episode in particular. I want to throat punch whoever okayed this or decided that this had to happen, where we had to have a whole bunch of trolls speak in posh English accents and be like proper gentlemen, even though they're like these like drag people. Like, who approved this? Who did this? Why? and if I'm going to further rant, so I ended up having to look this up because I picked it up on the first episode, and then I started taking notice the second episode, and then as the episode started washing over me, it just became more and more and more. I became more and more aware of it, and it started driving me a little bit insane because in the beginning, they started using. I think the first episode started using Enter Sandman, Metallica's Enter Sandman, in this series. Now, they were using like a lot of like the classic score, the classic music. They do some of the stuff that I kind of like. I love the Call the Conqueror soundtrack, where they do an orchestration, but they have, you know, a drum set and a rock guitar riff that goes with it. Like, I kind of like the mixed media of that kind of stuff, and I kind of felt like we were kind of getting a little bit of that when it came to Willow, and then it ends with Enter Sandman from Metallica, and it was not even Metallica, it was a cover song. Somebody else was covering it, and I'm like, that's kind of weird. But I kind of blew it off like when it happened the first couple times, because it's like, well, I like a Knight's Tale, and a Knight's Tale kind of does the same thing. They do Queen's We Will Rock You, and there's a couple other things. There's a David Bowie song in the middle of it that they do. They kind of have some modern music of it, and that's an affect of that movie that I actually kind of like. It's weird, but I kind of like it. And when they first started doing it, it was just like, oh, well, this is kind of weird, but I kind of like it. But this is kind of like a Willow kind of thing. Like, I don't know if this fits with this kind of thing. And when it kept going on and on and on, and they kept doing it over and over and over again, and it was just different music. It just kind of really took me out of this. And it's just like, oh, really? And I took to the internet. You know, I did the thing that I always complain about, and I took to the internet, and I read a couple articles. I think there was a Wall Street Journal of all things article. I don't think I have the URL up anymore, but I'd credit it. I'd credit the writer, but yeah, like, his complaint was that there was a bunch of modernization. It wasn't just the music. Like, his lower complaint was the dialect, the dialogue. He's like, you know, you're going into a movie that's about medieval kind of things, and you have characters saying, you know, dude, bro, you know, I'm pulling out all these 80s references because I have no idea what modern kids say. I should know it. I should like pull stuff out of Kyra and Riley's dialogue. I know like what, like point or no period, you know, they say period, or they say, poggers or whatever, you know? So they were kind of picking out where they hate where like these characters kind of speak like that. And to me, I did that. That didn't bother me whatsoever, because you got to modernize that kind of stuff, and I don't really agree. Like, I don't really want them to be speaking Shakespearean either. You know, I just want them to speak in a way that I understand them. So if they're speaking in modern, with modern inflections or modern wordage, verbiage, that doesn't really bother me as much. That doesn't take me out of the series as much. Although, you know, in Avatar, the one character kept saying, bro. That bothered me. But in this kind of thing, and that's a future movie, gosh darn it. That's a way in the future. That's a sci-fi future movie, and he's saying bro. And then I'm not really worried about poggers being in Willow. I don't think poggers it was ever used in Willow. But, you know, that didn't really bother me as much. You know, I kind of feel like that guy kind of is one of those people that wanted Prey, where they wanted the cut of Prey where they're all speaking in their native tongue. Prey, there was a bunch of people where they wanted them to speak in their Native American language and then just have subtitles. Like, I would have hated actually having to watch Prey and have to read the entire movie. I want to enjoy Prey. So in like Willow, I don't really want them to be speaking in Old English and speaking Shakespearean throughout the whole thing. I'm fine with the modernization. The second point that he did bring up, and then I really noted, I took notice to it, was the modernization of clothing. Again, I was kind of on the fence. I was kind of back and forth with the clothing, where like the prince, I wonder if they did this because of Val Kilmer playing Jim Morrison. He had this kind of like 60s garb, and I kind of feel like they kind of did this callback with his son, the Prince, where he was kind of wearing this kind of like 60s kind of clothing, which kind of it bothered me at first, and I think it really bothered me towards the end, where like he's wearing like this more modern like leather jacket that, at least like try to be, I mean, Willow doesn't really take place in any time period, so it doesn't really matter. But it does kind of bother me a little bit where, I want a fantasy, I want a D&D kind of thing, I want a sword and sorcery kind of movie, and I don't really want like, a Prince dressed like he's in a biker gang, again, is a Disney thing. I mean, we have the mods in the freaking Book of Boba Fett movie, or TV series rather, where we rip this off from the 1940s, 50s, or 60s, where this kind of look it doesn't fit in Book of Boba Fett, and this design doesn't really fit in Willow, and it is bothersome. But the ultimate sin, and this is the one point on the article that I do agree with, where it was like the use of modern music in the whole thing, where it's covers, like there are people covering stuff, and is this an effect of Stranger Things, where we have to recall the 80s? Stranger Things is a period piece anyway. It takes place in the 80s, so when you have Metallica in Stranger Things, it makes sense. When you have Metallica in Willow, I don't know if that makes sense at all. And it's like the combination of that and the posh English speaking, the freaking the trolls. Oh, I hated that episode. I mean, I liked the plot of the episode. I loved the switcheroony that we did in the episode. I think this is that episode is the first time we hear Val Kilmer's voice. There's all this subplot that sets up a sequel series. Hopefully Val Kilmer comes back to be in the sequel. Hopefully there is a sequel. I mean, I liked it enough. I mean, the music is like a bad tick to it, but it's not. It doesn't ruin the series for me. I think I was satisfied with the series overall. I mean, the only other aspect that is, it seems to really lean heavily into Evil Dead and Army of Darkness kind of. It reaches those kind of territories where like. But that's my rambling of Willow. It was more of a reflection of Willow than a review. I was just kind of wanted to reflect from the original movie all the way up to this. I know I didn't get into any deep details with the Willow series, but if you'd like me to get in the deep details, please let me know. Comment wherever you're able to comment. I know this podcast, it's hard to comment any place where I can see it, but I do want to know if you want me to explore Willow a little bit deeper. I just wanted to get out the whole, experience, the nostalgia of it. I think that's how I want to run BestowCast a little bit, is the nostalgia and how it relates to me. I know I'm an old fart, and it may not relate to the same to you, and maybe that's another thing that I'd like to hear in the comments, wherever you can comment, is how does this reflect to you if you're not a child of the 80s? But that is my time for now, and I will catch you next week. Bye-bye.